Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, today I'm joined by Dr. Thomas Krause, an expert in culture and leadership with clients like NASA and top healthcare systems. In this episode, we dig into how small leadership decisions quietly shape an organization's culture and why ignoring them can lead to a disaster. Now, if you think culture is just a soft issue, this conversation will change your mind. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Thomas Krause. Tom is a world renowned thought leader focused on decision making, leadership, and behavior in the creation of a positive organizational culture. He has designed culture change interventions to prevent catastrophic events, fatalities, and disasters. He founded Behavioral Science Technology Inc. and is presently chairman of the Krause Bell Group. He has authored 5 books on leadership, safety, and culture change, and his articles have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, USA Today, and more. He has a new book out called If Your Culture Could Talk. It's a story about culture change. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn more about leadership and its impact on culture. So, Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. It's an honor to meet you. And I'm excited to talk about culture change and culture in particular, because I think it's so important in leadership. And I think we don't talk about it enough. So let's dive in. You do a lot of work in healthcare, a lot of different industries, but obviously, healthcare, you spend a lot of time in healthcare. Why is culture so critical in an industry like healthcare?
So it's of course it's critical in every kind of organization, but healthcare has unique difficulties and is a more complex organizational structure generally, and so harder to get at the culture. So a manufacturing site or a group of sites, they're under one roof. You have one leader. You have a hierarchy that goes to the front line. Maybe you have a labor organization, or maybe not. And that's a pretty sort of clean structure. And if you want to get something done, you need the board of directors, you need the CEO, and then you need that to filter down through the rest of the organization. Healthcare is different than that. Healthcare has a group of physicians who have a different kind of relationship to the organization. And then it has administrative people, and it has a whole nursing staff and other medical specialties sub to physicians, physical therapists and occupational therapists, and so on. And so a piece of the organization comes under one administrative lead, but then other pieces do not.
Mm.
And the physicians who sort of have the most to say about things, they're kind of the authority figures in the organization, rightly so. I mean, they're you go to the hospital with a hip to be replaced. The physician is the one you're really interested in. That's the person. That's the one that you care about. Uh, but that creates a kind of tension between the rest of the organization and this authority figure. And the physician often thinks of the healthcare facility as something that is there for them. The
Mm.
reason this hospital exists is for me, because so I can put my patients there. And they better do things right because they're my patients and I want them well taken care of, and so on. When that organization says to the physician, by the way, we want you to wash your hands in between patients. That matters, and it's a big deal, and we really want you to do that. The physicians often, this is different places, different people, but it's not uncommon that the doctor says to himself or herself, "Oh yeah, well, do I want to do that? Is that something I want to do? These people are keep talking about it all the time, like it's really
Mm.
important. I'll do that when I think of it. Okay, next, let's go." And then so if you study how often do physicians wash their hands in between patients, you don't get 99%.
Mm.
You might not even get 80%. You might get 50%, depending on the organization. And so how are you going to get at that? That's a cultural thing. By you understand? You see what I mean by that's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
In other
Yeah.
words,
Well,
yeah,
it's a very unique culture in that, you have, like you said, there's not everybody works for the same boss. So, implementing protocols that are the same, every time, when you have sort of independent people sort of coming and going, it might be very difficult, to be able to implement that and to, and to be consistent with it, for versus where in my manufacturing business, everybody works for me. So this is the
yeah,
protocol for running the shop. And, if there's any problems, I'm the person that's going to step in and say, hey, you need to follow the rules. If
right,
washing your hands is part of it, you need to wash your hands. Like I'm the
right,
boss, you do what I tell you to do.
yep,
Whereas you have these experts that come in, that again, that are essential to healthcare that sort of feel like I'll do things my way,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So there are different kinds of healthcare facilities. There are those that have an academic affiliation. There are those that have a religious affiliation. There are some that are profit making, some that are non-profit making, some based in the community, and all of that adds to the complexity. And then to make matters more complex or more difficult, there's no OSHA that
Hmm.
oversees patient safety. So, in a healthcare organization, you're concerned about worker safety and patient safety. Worker safety, the people who work there who slip and fall or have some other kind of event that causes them to be injured. Not usually serious or fatal, but occasionally serious or fatal, enough that that's something that healthcare leaders are concerned about. But then you also have the patient safety side, which is a different kind of thing altogether. Do
Hmm.
I pick up an infection while I'm in there for surgery? Do I get the wrong medication? Is the wrong medication given to me, which causes a kind of reaction which could be even fatal?
Hmm.
Uh, but so those events happen, and they happen in an amazingly frequent. They're an amazingly frequent occurrence. Uh, but there's no federal system that oversees how those are supposed to be reported.
Hmm.
OSHA has been around since the early 70s.
Right.
And they came up with a whole system of here's if an injury is of this severity based on this criteria, it happened. This happens. You have to report that. This one you have to investigate. This one you have to send in to us, and we'll come talk to you, etc. Healthcare has no such thing. There's no even for fatalities, even for patient fatalities. There's no systematic reporting structure or even classification structure. So if you want to know how many uh, patient fatalities have occurred across a period of time in the United States, you can't go to records that have been where those things have been reported. The studies on that question, which have been going on for the last 15 years or so, come up with hugely different numbers for the
Hmm.
number of fatalities. The lowest is about 40,000 per year. The highest is about 350,000
Oh.
per year. Now, for context, automobile accidents cause about 40,000 fatal events. Worker safety in the United States adds up to about 5,000 events. So if you took an average of how many fatalities are occurring in the healthcare system to patients as a result of errors, it would be in the vicinity of 150,000 per year. So it's really huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean, it's almost like the impact. So it's almost like, OSHA, we've done a lot of work to reduce the amount of work hazards to where it's, 5,000, as you mentioned, fatalities a year, which is certainly a lot better than it sounds like with healthcare. Yet we're not doing anything to sort of regulate or at least create a way to measure these accidents that lead to deaths. And it's seems like that's a major issue. Depending on how you measure it, it's still a significant issue. So tell us a little bit about why safety protocols often slip, and how's culture involved with that?
yeah. So why they slip depends on the state of the organization.
Hmm.
So in a very high functioning organization, the most frequent reason that safety protocols fail is that some kind of change has occurred, and the organization did not recognize that change sufficiently with respect to what it meant to the safety protocols.
Hmm.
In an organization that's less developed and they're having more incidents and they're early in the game and so on, they're not nearly as good. Uh, those protocols may not even be in place, or if they are in place, they're in paper only. They're not taken seriously. If you interviewed leaders, say at a plant of 300 employees, if you interviewed second level leaders and above, uh, and you ask them about the safety protocols, they might not even know.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So it's interesting. So it depends on the organization maturity, obviously, and if they're taking this thing seriously. And then what can leaders do about that? I mean, one of the things that's really unique, and we were just talking before we press record, is that healthcare is sort of this interesting thing with in terms of culture, where you have these experts, these doctors, right, who are the experts at everything, and sometimes they're like the god in the operating room, right? And so when there's a potential you know mistake being happened, like a nurse or maybe a younger worker in there sees it and should be able to address it, but there's an intimidation factor. Well, that's the doctor, they must know that that's a problem. I imagine that the culture is kind of interesting inside healthcare, in that you have these experts that are performing these very difficult tasks that they've been highly trained for, and so are they, and so people are probably intimidated to step up and say something, right, if there's a problem or there's something that's missed in the procedure.
right. So, but technically, that is called upward communication
Hmm.
in the scientific literature on this stuff. They call it upward communication. And it's a variable that is highly predictive of performance across the board.
Hmm.
So, does information flow from the front line up to the people who make decisions? And that was the essential one of the essential factors in the NASA failure of the
Right.
Columbia Space Shuttle, in the Brumadinho dam collapse in Brazil, in the BP event that happened, and in many, many fatal and serious injuries that occur. After you investigate them, you find that upward communication was an issue. It's a particular issue in healthcare for the reasons that you were outlining. So if I'm a nurse and a neurosurgeon is about to operate on the wrong side of the brain,
Yeah.
I don't feel free, perhaps, to say, Dr. Famous, I think you're on the wrong side of the brain.
Yeah.
That would feel to me like I was being disrespectful of a highly trained and person who I have a great deal of respect for. For me to say that would be for me to think I'm putting myself at his or her level, and I'm not at their level. So I'm here
Hmm.
to support them. Similar thing happens with the airline pilots. The co-pilot doesn't want to say to the main pilot, you're about to go down the wrong runway. And
Yeah.
similar thing happens in organizational life in general. That information doesn't flow up the way that it should. So, and now that's cultural. That's a cultural attribute.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
this the kind of place? Your kid goes to work in this place, and you say, "How is it over there? What's it like to work there?" And it's a big deal to you because you know that if this kid gets stuck in that place for 25 years and it's awful, the way they
Yeah.
run things is terrible. They don't treat people fairly. They have all kinds of inside deals going on. You can get disciplined. They're not fair in the way they do stuff, and so on. That's going to be terrible for them to work in that
Hmm.
place for 20 years. So you ask them, you really mean it. How is it to work around that place? Uh, so it's a very, very big deal what the attributes of a given culture are. And the research on that is to a whole bunch of variables have been identified that define the culture. And that's a better way of thinking about it than to just say, well, is it a good culture? Is it a bad culture? To say, well, is upward communication functioning the way that it should? Are people supported? That's called perceived organizational justice or perceived organizational trust, something like that. Uh, so do I get the support that I need to satisfy objectives? Or is it the culture is such that we pay you to solve problems? So
Mm.
don't come to me and tell me why you can't solve this problem.
Oh yeah.
Come to me and tell me the solution to this problem. That's what I want to hear from you. How did you fix it? How did you make that work right? Tell me that.
Yeah.
And if you say, well, I've been working on it for a year and a half and I don't have a solution and I'm kind of stuck and I've got a few things I've been trying to do, but I can't get the resources to do them. It would take additional cost or additional time. And I say, oh, wait a minute, you want more time? You want more
Mm.
time, more money? You haven't solved this yet? So so that's a cultural thing. And there's a whole set of those variables that have been studied. We worked with NASA after Columbia, and we saw both of those variables be low for NASA. The rest of their things were high. The rest of their attributes were high, um, but they were low in those two variables. Uh, so that now that's a what I'm saying now is a different way of thinking about culture than is typical. Typical
Mm.
people think, well, it's the way we do things around here. It's
Right.
positive or it's negative. It's how we get things done. Uh, but my research is a lot to gain by thinking of culture as a set of variables which can be measured and which comprise something like an infrastructure, so cultural infrastructure. And that set of variables defines how we get things done.
That makes a lot of sense. It's how we get things done and what our standards are, and what our the what we want to accomplish, but also what we want to make sure doesn't happen with respect to safety. And so I like the way you phrase that, because when I think of it, it's fun, interesting. I've met so many engineers that have sort of got into the leadership space, because I do believe that leadership and culture is a little bit like a system, and everything has to be operating right for you to have a great outcome. So I think it's almost natural that technical people end up in this strange world of leadership, because I think of my organization like a system. Like everything has to be moving right and working right. I've got to have the right people. I have the right procedures. I have to have the right amount of influence to be able to get the outcomes that I want at the end of the day. And so you're constantly always adjusting the machine, if you will. That's, I'm putting it in air quotes, to be able to operate efficiently. So the idea that culture is sort of a set of variables that you work on to be able to optimize the outcome makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I think that's interesting. So what if you have a culture that maybe isn't performing up to speed, whether it's output or safety concerns, where does the leader start? Where do they start with thinking about culture as in terms of a machine to be able to optimize it for the outcomes?
Right. So the first thing is to understand that leadership creates the culture.
Hmm.
This didn't just come out of nowhere. It didn't just show up one day. It is the way that it is because leadership uh, leadership created it, and the way leadership creates it is through decision making. So leaders make decisions, and they often make decisions that have cultural impact without realizing that they're doing it. So if you ask them, do leaders create culture? They'll say, sure. And then if you say, well, tell me some decisions that you've made in the last 3 months that influence the culture, they have to think for quite a while before they recognize, yeah, I guess that decision had cultural impact. That guy we fired, and the way we fired them, the decision that we made to change the rules that influenced people's pay, the way we handled the person who objected to that change, the decisions that we made in an effort to improve productivity, to cut some corners so we could go a little faster. All those decisions had impact, but the leader often doesn't recognize that they are having that impact.
Yeah. Yeah, that I think you're really touching on something that is really important is that every one of those decisions defines what your culture is. You can write down on a piece of paper what your culture is. Like for example, we have a in our company, we say we have a no questions asked return policy. So if any customer has a problem, you return it no questions asked. So at one time a customer came back and wanted to return a lot of product to us, and they came to me and said, this guy says he ordered the wrong thing and wants to return all of it to us. So there's the cultural challenge. So if I say no, that's just too much product, it's just going to be, that's a financial hit to our business, then I say that issue is really truly not part of our culture, right? But if I say yes, we're going to take it back even though we're going to take a financial hit, it's what we are and what we stand for, then I'm defining the culture by my decisions, not by what I wrote on paper, but how I make that decision in the moment.
Yes.
And I think that's what you're saying is those little decisions that we make every day impact what our employees see as important to us as an organization.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's it. I think that's right. We've studied with respect to safety, we've studied the decision processes that go on that lead up to and create the opportunity for the incident to happen. We've
Mm,
studied fatal events that way, hundreds of them. And if you look at it up close, you can really see clearly how important those decisions are to the exposure for the fatality and to the culture. And it's just often not recognized. It's often not recognized. A high tech company that I know of up in the Bay Area, one of the giant tech companies, well known, recently had a layoff of some hundreds of people. And the way that they handled that was if you were one that was laid off, when you woke up that morning and turned on your computer, you found a message which said you're no longer commuted, you're no longer connected,
mm,
and no longer work here.
oh,
Period. That was it. That came in the middle of the night.
ah,
I don't know how you could do that any worse. I mean, I don't know. You
no,
tried, you
you
know?
couldn't.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and that just tells you the rest of the organization. So the survivors, if you will, from that, they're thinking, well, that could happen to me at any time. So this
Yes.
company doesn't value employees. I'm going to start looking for another job, even if you survive, right? Even if you're considered one of the more vital employees and you're retained, you're now looking for another job because of the way they treated the people that, your colleagues, if you will. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And if you study those decisions, about half of the time, it's not a mistake of probability estimation. It's that it just didn't occur to them. Just didn't
Yeah.
occur to them that that was a factor in this decision that they made.
Wow.
About half the time.
Yeah.
The other half, there are other kinds of cognitive biases that go into a bad decision. And you're familiar with the cognitive bias
Yes.
work of Daniel Kahneman and so on. It's wonderful work. He's one of my two heroes in the industrial organizational world. I think Kahneman really changed the game. And we have in our work in studying the decisions that lead up to serious events, we have taken very gone to a lot of lengths to identify the kinds of biases that were present in that decision. So
Mm.
it's usually, and you can, about half of the time, you can find biases that are significant. But about another half of the time, it wasn't a matter of bias. It just didn't get onto the page. It
Yeah.
wasn't something that was even considered.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, kind of an important message here is that every decision we make is important, and it does affect our culture as leaders. And so whether you think it doesn't or not,
Yep.
it does. And
Yep.
so, that could remove 50% right there. Is just know that every decision affects your culture, right?
Yep.
And so you
Yep.
need to remember that when
Yeah.
you're making a decision, so
But
yeah.
it's hard. I mean, I once, when I had a consulting company up until 2012 that I sold, and then I took some years off and tried to retire, and then decided I wanted to keep working, so I started another one. But the other company that was a couple of hundred employees at the time that I sold it, uh, along the way in that organization, we didn't get a couple of new projects that we thought we were going to get. We thought we were the best of the people offering for the work, and we expected to get them. We didn't get them. That happened like 3 or 4 times in a short period of time. It got me concerned, and so I got a little group and we talked to the customer base about asking them questions about how they perceived us and so on. And what came back was, you're a little arrogant and you're a little inflexible.
Mm,
And I thought, holy moly, how could that be? I mean,
yeah,
that's about the last, as a consulting company, that's about the last thing you want to hear, that you're arrogant and inflexible.
yeah.
So I began then the process of trying to figure out, well, how have I created that or encouraged that? And what I realized along the way was that I used to love to brag in front of our employees about how good we were.
Ah,
And I meant it. I mean, I
yeah,
really
yeah.
meant it. It was like we had better technology, in my opinion. I mean, we had done the research and we had dug the stuff out and we had demonstrated that it really worked. And it wasn't, get flowers and strew them around the plant and everything will be fine. It was real rigorous, well-defined content. And so I love to say in front of the consulting group in meetings, I love to say, well, those people that we're competing with, they don't have the stuff we do. We are better than they are. Look, here's why. And I blah, 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 blah. Not realizing that the effect of that would be to create this sense of arrogance and inflexibility.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. So you're doing it as a way to motivate the troops and to tell them, to help them have pride about what they do. And yet it creates a situation where, you're that the employees feel like they're better than others.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's really interesting. So you're doing it for the right reasons, but it has a adverse impact that you hadn't planned on. Yeah.
That I hadn't realized would happen. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I meant it. I mean, I was being honest. I really thought
Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
better. I
Yeah.
wasn't trying to build up anything that I didn't believe, but I didn't realize the impact that that would have.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I do it a lot in my company. So now you got me thinking. So maybe I'm doing that the wrong way, but I'm trying to do it for the right reasons. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to know,
Yeah.
to see, yeah, the impact it's having on what our customers see us as an organization. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. Wow, that's a great example of how even when we think we're doing things right, it could still have a negative impact to our culture. So we have to be careful about that. So there's a lot of unknown impacts to our decisions as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. One thing, your latest book is called If Your Culture Could Talk, and you've written that as a story, as a fable. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote it that way and what leaders can sort of pull out of this book and the way it's written.
Yeah. So I experienced a bit of frustration at getting the subtlety of these things across to leaders. Everybody knows the right words. I've never consulted with a group where the leaders didn't understand the right words and couldn't tell you what the right words were. But if you dig down a little, then you find that it's actually kind of rare that the individual actually gets the cultural stuff and that that's consistent with the decisions that they make and the behaviors that they exhibit. Um, so I was thinking about that one time, and somehow I just sort of drifted off into the idea of, well, what is this thing, culture? And the more I thought about it, the more perplexed I got. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of a weird thing. I mean, you have values within the individual. We know what that is. You have opinions within the individual. Uh, you have you have studies in cultural anthropology where a whole country has a certain way of doing things, and
Mhm.
it's different in South America than it is in China, and so on. You can understand that. But in an organization, how is it that this weird thing called culture forms? How and what is it? And the more I thought about it, the less I felt like I understood it. I mean, where does that? I began to think about these. I was going to sleep one night and I was thinking about this sort of weird stuff. And I thought, well, so where does it exist? I mean, where does it live? It lives between these people.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. That's weird. How can something live
Yeah.
between these people? What could that be about? So, I thought about that quite a bit, and then I had the idea, well, I think I could get at that in a story better than I can in writing an academic sort of paper that lays the stuff out. And so I thought, well, what if I just told the story of a CEO who one night got a phone call saying this horrible thing had happened and it was going to be public and it was going to make them look bad and lives had been lost and it was going to be. Now, this is after I had worked with NASA, so I had seen that kind of thing
Yeah.
at NASA. And then I just took them through the process of this CEO realizing that he had this really big problem. He had to address it, and he didn't know how to address it. He
Mm.
was an engineer. He was technically very, very competent, but he wasn't a people person. He left that to the HR people, and the HR people weren't terrific. They had these kind of flowery ideas that he didn't really think made sense, but he didn't know. It wasn't his up to him to decide that stuff. So he was hands off of the culture. Now he's got to take it on. And he realizes that he doesn't know how to do it. He doesn't get it. And he's an engineer. So he feels like to take on a problem, you got to understand all the elements in that problem.
Yeah.
And he didn't. So he goes to sleep perplexed and he has a dream. And in the dream, he meets the personification of his culture in a being, a fictitious being. And he has conversations with that being. And the conversations allow a kind of communication that you could really never have with a big shot executive leader,
Yeah.
where the culture can say, "Hey, don't give me that crap. You're just talking. You're just talking. You don't mean
Yeah.
that. Come on, get with it. I mean, let's really do this. Don't play around with me." You couldn't say that to a high uh, flyer CEO, but this fictitious thing can, speaking as the culture,
Yeah.
and that kind of fit conceptually that is what happens. The culture does speak to you.
Yeah.
You may not listen, you may not want to hear it, but the culture does speak to you when you have a layoff and somebody says, this place has always been rotten and I'm really glad to get out of here. I wouldn't tell you, etc. The culture speaks to you, but you have to learn how to listen to it. So well, that was where and then I got into it. It was fun. It was fun to write that
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
So,
I love that, and so many leadership authors have taken that step where they've written as a story or a fable, only because, like you say, it's an abstract idea, and to try. I love the idea of, if your culture could talk, what would it talk? What would it say to you? And the
yeah,
culture being this sort of entity that's having a conversation with you, because you can't do that unless it's a fictional story, right?
yeah,
And you
yeah,
need to be able to set up the construct so that you can then have this conversation, then you can learn from it. And so I love, my hats off to you for doing that, because I think sometimes we, as leadership educators or authors, we try to hammer home the 5 things you need to do to improve your culture. Well, that's great, right? But I think the nuances of culture require this kind of a dialogue, I think. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic. Well, this has been a great conversation. You've given us a lot to think about with respect to culture and how it impacts our organizations. What final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
Read Deming. I think Deming, back in the 80s, I think he got all the stuff that we're now talking about with different words. I think he got all of it. And I think he's my hero of heroes. I think that every leader, and the young ones have not read Deming. They won't even know who he is.
Yeah.
But reading Deming's his book Out of the Crisis, in which he outlines his 14 points, I think he captures all of it.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's such a great fundamental document that really put us on a path of continuous improvement. You could argue Lean and Six Sigma sort of, birthed from some of his writing and research and the work that he did. It's such
Yep,
an important thing. As a manufacturing guy, I've lived, the Deming principles my whole life. So I
yep.
love that you bring that up. And sometimes now, as a 58-year-old, I'll bring up Deming to young people, and they're like, "Who's he?" And I'm like,
Who's yeah,
don't don't say that.
right,
It's
right.
but I love that. I think it's a great place to start. And it's funny because I do teach on a college level, and I haven't introduced Deming to my students, and I think I will now. Just that you brought it up, it reminds me I need to go back to that sort of source document to get them up to speed with where some of this stuff actually originated. So I love that you brought that up. So very important. Tom, this has been fantastic. How can our listeners find out more about you and the work that you do?
So my email is tom@trkrause.com.
Fantastic. And we'll put that link in the show notes. We'll put a link to the new book, Leadership. If Your Culture Could Talk. We want to put a link in there. And again, a great book to sort of unpack where your culture may be a problem. I think what Tom brings up is a really good point. Even if you think you're doing everything right, it could create an adverse effect in your organization. So get this book, and it'll help you sort of think about your culture a lot differently than maybe the way you're thinking about it today. So every action we make, every decision we make can impact our culture, and it can have a lot of negative consequences, as we've seen with the healthcare industry. So get this book, follow the links in the show notes below. Reach out to Tom if he has questions. He's the expert. Our job here is to introduce you to the experts. Tom is an expert in this field. If you got a question about culture and maybe something that we talked about on this show, reach out to Tom. He's going to help you. He's going to teach you. He's going to show you the right way to do things. Tom, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for the important work that you're doing. And thanks for sharing some of that with our audience today.
My pleasure. Nice to talk with you. It was fun.
It was fun. I enjoyed it as well. Thank you again. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.